Good afternoon. How's everyone feeling? How's the conference been so far? Let's hear it. Let's hear it. We have less than 24 hours to go, so keep your stamina up, but it'll be a great ride, I promise you. So here we are. I am so thrilled about the next program. We have 3 artists who do exactly what John Powell described yesterday, which is they create narratives that connect to the unconscious mind and advance a fair and inclusive society. I have the great privilege of introducing the inimitable Favianna Rodriguez. Favianna's bio is in the program, but I want to mention some of her work that isn't included that's also very important. We know she is an interdisciplinary artist, a cultural strategist, and an activist born and raised in Oakland. Her work addresses migration, gender equity, climate change, and racial justice. Her artistic practices include visual art, community organizing, and power building. And Favianna helped co-found the Eastside Arts Alliance Cultural Center in 2001, which was part of our cultural tour. She did so with the mentorship from artists of the Black Arts Movement and the Black Panther Party. In 2016, she received the Robert Rauschenberg Artist as Activist Fellowship for her work around mass incarceration. And in 2017, she was awarded an Atlantic Fellowship for Racial Equity for her work around environmental justice and narrative change. And recently, she has partnered with Jill Soloway, creator of the television series Transparent, as well as Time's Up Hollywood, to organize with artists in the entertainment industry to build an intersectional artist power movement to challenge entrenched white male power in the entertainment industry. So please, help me welcome, and hold on to your hats, Favianna Rodriguez.
Hello, everyone. So exciting to have you in our town, AKA the town, AKA Biggity Biggity O. You are here, and before I get started, I really love this shirt. You know, this is something that we artists say all the time, that one job should be enough. So artists, you know, we stand in solidarity with those who are demanding a living wage. You know, the median income for musicians, for visual artists, is $30,000 a year. And so we, as artists, many artists are are being affected by the income inequality gap. And so not only are we thankful to GIA for moving the location, but also we received a big gift, which is that we've all been able to experience this city in such a different way, and even being able to walk up and down these streets and see the reality of what it means when 2 communities collide, because inequality is very much present here in Oakland. And so I thank you, Marriott workers, for also giving us the gift to connect with each other in a very different way, and just to see each other in the hallway. It was really great. So I'll start a little bit with my story. I am first-generation American. My parents immigrated here from Peru, and I grew up in deep East Oakland. And Oakland, you know, back in the day was one of the places where the crack cocaine epidemic hit very hard. We were considered one of the homicide capitals of the country in the 90s. And I'm really the first generation who has even the ability to consider to be an artist. And I'm very thankful for that because in many ways, my creativity is the product of witnessing my immigrant parents create something out of nothing. But what it meant to grow up in an immigrant family, you know, the oldest, was that it was all about math and science. Because as anyone can tell you, in a Latino family, it's all about education because it's the only opportunity for us to get out of poverty. And so math and science was what I was groomed, I mean, to the point where I would go to Saturday engineering academy, summer engineering academy, and I had a math tutor after school because I also had to be the best. You know, Latino parents, always we have to be the number one. And I knew I wanted to be an artist since I was a kid, but art had to be a hobby. And so it was something that I would do after doing all my homework and counting all my mom's cash from her 3 jobs. My mom was a total entrepreneur, and both my parents worked really hard, everything from being janitors to figuring out how to how to make taxes for our community. And it was then that I could really do art. And it was hard because in my community, I would witness literally gang fights across the street and police brutality, but somehow I would find my way to the community center and take the free art classes that were offered by the California Arts Council. And so I share this because as young people growing up in impacted communities, often the only touch points that we get to art and to express ourselves are those things that are offered in our communities for free. Because at that time in Oakland Public Schools, I mean, we were dealing with a school system that was collapsing. So fast forward, you know, if I was always, my parents were like doctor, lawyer, engineer. So I never dreamed that I would be a full-time artist. It just, I didn't consider it. And I got a full ride to UC Berkeley. And it was there in an ethnic studies class that I met a woman, Irena Cervantes, who said, "You are so talented. Have you heard of a place called Self-Help Graphics in Los Angeles?" Which is one of the only Latino art centers in the country that really specializes in printmaking. And so I got included in a portfolio of master women artists. And it was the first time that I was in a community where I saw artists who really looked like me and who supported me. Now keep in mind that if you don't take art in high school, there's no way you're going to get into an art school. And so I didn't have an art portfolio. And although by the time I turned 18, I was like, I got to do what I love to do, I just could not get into an art school. And I discovered the Getty Multicultural Internship Program, which I think was also mentioned here. But it also became another touch point to understand how it was that the arts ecosystem functioned and to be introduced to a community of practice, because I had not had exposure to that. In my high school, the art classes were all white kids. And it was just not something that was accessible to me to be an artist. So fast forward, I tried to get into art school. I kept getting rejected. And finally I just said, okay, forget this. I'm going to just drop out of school and learn how to code, because it was the boom of the .com. And I was like, if I'm going to have a voice, I'm going to learn how to do it through technology. And it was then that I met people like Elena Serrano, Amiri Baraka, Bobby Seale, Emory Douglas, the Minister of Culture of the Black Panther Party, Sonia Sanchez, who taught me about the legacy of what black artists had fought for. And I learned about the civil rights movement, and I learned about Nina Simone and James Baldwin and Langston Hughes. But what puzzled me is that, you know, Nina Simone died without health insurance. And that the artists who came before us in the Chicano movement and the artists who came before us in the black arts movement did not leave us an infrastructure. And so although we knew that they had an impact, we as a generation did not have cultural wealth that we could tap. And you know, the number one thing that artists need is space to practice their art, and they need places and they need communities of support. And we did not have that. And I share that because that needs to be our task. We cannot have, when you have growing populations of communities of color, and we make up almost 40% in states like California, we can't have infrastructural racist inequality to the point where we don't even are able to go to cultural centers. And so Eastside Arts Alliance became a cultural center between the lake and 101st, 100 blocks without access to culture, and we changed that. And so what that meant, what I learned is just that we need to fight for assets, for spaces, for communities of connection in order to undo what systemic racism has done, which is that it has disconnected us from the opportunity to express ourselves. That is a product of racism. And it's extremely harmful because I also, as a Latina, the first time I saw myself reflected on television on the main screen was when Selena came out, 1996. Okay, since then, what have we had? Latinos make up 50 million, and we are completely invisible. And so, for us to be able to shape culture means that we can also shape policies. We as artists shape the national imagination. And so here in the Bay Area, where are we? We're in the home of the Black Panther Party, the free speech movement, the Chicano movement. And it's such a beautiful ecosystem because it's here that artists like Boots and Kamau and myself, and even Ryan Coogler, Zendaya, who went to the Oakland School of the Arts. It's here in this environment where we've been able to thrive alongside freedom fighters. And that we've been informed, not just by the fights on the street, but a culture of innovation. Tech, this is the state of California. We have two major cultural forces here, and that's Hollywood and tech. And all of those things have taught us to be innovators. And so in many ways, us as artists, we've had to create our own pathways. We've had to figure out how, when you keep hearing no's, how do you eventually arrive to a yes? And it means being highly creative. It means being a musician and figuring out how to work your screenplay on the side. It means forging the right partnerships until you finally can build a critical mass. And I think this is important, but I also think there's a lot of people left behind. And it should not be so hard to be an artist. It should not be so hard for us to navigate systems to the point that we are working harder. Women of color are working harder. We get paid much less than white men. Latinas make 51 cents to every dollar that a white man does. So there's a cost to it, and ultimately is that we end up subsidizing what the system has not done. And so I ask you, why don't we have 100 Kamaus or 100 Boots or 100 Faviannas? And what would it take for us to create that? So in closing, I want to leave you with a few inquiries. So we know that in order to address the country's and the world's most pressing issues, whether it's climate change or gender inequality or trans inclusion, that we need to change the culture. Politics moves very slowly. I mean, you see who are the people who are running Congress. I mean, it's just like these folks are from another freaking era. I mean, seriously, their worldview is very different than the worldview we're watching on television or what we're seeing in plays or what we're experiencing in our artistic lives. So culture moves way faster. I mean, Ellen came out, 1997, the TV show Ellen came out 1 year after Defense of Marriage Act. Okay, the play about Matthew Shepard's life, Laramie Project, 2 years after he was dead. It took 11 years to get his hate act. And Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter, a movement created by somebody here in Oakland, Alicia Garza, co-created by her. You have people, basketball players, you have John Legend getting up on stage talking about these issues. Culture always moves faster than politics, 10, 15 years faster. Politics is the final manifestation of an idea whose time has come. But we as cultural workers, we create those ideas. We create those ideas and we set the seeds for public will. Our work is extremely important. And especially now, people say narrative change. I am completely connected to the social justice world. You won't believe how many narrative change reports there are out there that don't even mention art or artists. So we're getting left behind this conversation, and it's important because all of a sudden there's all these resources for narrative change, but artists are not being included in that. And we have to be aware of that because in reality, social movements can't happen without artists. Artists are extremely indispensable. But we also know that as artists, the power is in our imagination because we can create the future of the world that has not yet arrived. That is the power, is that not only do we fight against the things that are not working, we're not just the no people, we're the yes people. And we need to build real resilience in our community. And so if I ask you, we as artists now, we have to claim our rightful seat at the table. But we now know that culture is a battleground. Culture is not neutral. It's never been neutral. We have to move away from the centering of the white male gaze as what's neutral, because that's not neutral. And often right now, as we're talking about conversations and how we're changing the tide on conversations, for example, around sexual abuse and harassment, that is culture change happening before our very eyes. Although laws have not passed yet, culture has moved. And so if we know that culture is a battleground, and we know that who controls culture, did you know 96% of Hollywood is run by white men? 96%. And it's the same in museum boards, it's the same in music, it's the same in performance, it's the same in publishing. So essentially, we're viewing the world through a white male lens. And we are not going to solve the worst social problems when we are viewing the world in this way. We need other voices at the table. We need to understand that the fight for culture, for the creation of culture and the dissemination of culture, is a fight for our lives. And so to the tired system of entrenched male cis white power, I say time's up. And time's up. Thank you. Time's up. We need women at the table. We need queer folks, trans folks, people of color. We need women of color leadership at the table, because that's how we're going to truly win. And so I ask of you, as you're thinking, is that how are you going to challenge power? How are you going to leverage your power and privilege to really meet the moment? Because the moment, the future, is non-binary, it's women of color, it's about the environment, and the shifts are moving faster than we are. So let's get to work, people. Thank you so much.
So, we're going to start it off, right? I need a microphone.
She's bringing it down to you. She forgot to bring it.
Okay, sorry. Sometimes I get so excited, I forget. Okay. Yes. So, these are my homies. That's why we're like all at home right now, and we're just talking shit. So Kamau Bell and Boots Riley. So I want to share a quick anecdote. So I was just telling Kamau, you remember when I was the only one laughing at your jokes, and we would be at the Social Justice Netroots Nation Conference, and you would be, a comedian there, and we were like, yeah, go Kamau. And just to also know Boots, I remember we would be in these, in all of these meetings where the Panthers were there, and his father, who is just an amazing activist. And of course, it would always be about serve the people and organize this and organize that. But we also loved our art. And so it's just been such a beauty to see Boots, the Renaissance man, who is not just a musician and an organizer, and he can talk about communism all day long, but also to witness what he's created. And so I'm so honored to introduce Boots Riley and Kamau Bell to the stage. Thank you so much.
What's up?
Hello. Boots told me to get it started. Okay. Thank you for coming out today. I am W. Kamau Bell. This is Boots Riley. Give us a round of applause again. We have 29 minutes and 41 seconds to do this. Boots could fill that up without me saying a word, so we're going to see what happens here. First of all, I just want to check in with you as somebody who, when we first met, it was in the back of a coffee shop I think it was in Berkeley, for a benefit.
Yeah.
It was about, I
don't remember.
Huh? You don't remember?
I do. I met you so many times.
Yes.
I don't know.
Just backstage
what
a few minutes ago.
the first one was.
But first you emailed me a copy of Sorry to Bother You, 6, 7, 8 years ago.
Yeah, of the script.
Of the script, yes, the script, yes. And I read it and was like, great. I don't know how that's going to happen, but good luck, sir. It was so ambitious, and it stayed that ambitious. But I also know that you've just gone through this whole process of the film coming out. It's now out on all digital platforms and DVD and Blu-ray. You can get it, everybody. I'll do your commercial. Where are you at now? How are you? You know what I mean?
Well, being someone that has done art independently, let's say, for a long time, 20-something years. I'm so used to the promotion part of it, that so much about it is you've made this thing, which took a lot to figure out how to carve out the time to survive and make it, that you then have to get it out to the world. So most, like with Coup albums, there was always years between albums, and a lot of that was just me promoting that album, like getting out on the road, people hearing about it a little bit at a time, because we didn't always have like the big machine behind it. So I'm used to doing what I'm doing now, which is going around letting folks know that the movie exists. Because for many of us, and maybe many of you, it seems like everybody knows about this film, because that's how social media tricks you. It makes you think that everybody's thinking the same thing you are, or depending on what you like to hang around with, that everybody's thinking the opposite of you. But my life is promoting this movie right now and trying to figure out how to carve out time to write new stuff.
So I think the other thing I'm even getting to is like there's this, I think the weird thing that happens when people think you've hit it or you've made it, when success has come, especially when people feel like you finally made it when they wanted to. Sometimes there's a perception that they see you because they do think the movie is everywhere and it's doing that you're doing better than you are. You know what I mean? Like sort of the disconnect of like how you actually still are an artist who's trying out there trying to.
Yeah. Well, I think having, been like within the last recent years, been perpetually 10 months behind on the rent, and having throughout my career periods of time where the lights are cut off and I'm still doing that, yes, I'm doing better than that. Yeah. Much, better than that. But it's just because people just assume that someone that produces art and puts it out there is, surviving. But the real thing is that the only way I could make the art that I've made for 20-something years was to be, irresponsible. Like I should have gotten a job, maybe, right? Like, and most people will be like, wow, I've got kids. I'm putting them in danger. I should no longer be an artist, right? And that's the thing that most people, come up against, right? Like just trying to survive. So, I've been hearing like this dichotomy of like, when we talk about artist housing, whether it should be supporting artists or supporting families. Well, many of those families are people that would be artists had they had the support or the ability to spend the time on it. And, I know, I'm not even going to call her out because she might be here, but there's a girl in the early 90s that I would go around saying was the best rapper in the Bay Area. She now has kids and a job, and is probably not the best rapper in the Bay Area anymore because she doesn't get to practice that. And, so when we're talking about trying to support women in the arts or people of color in the arts, it comes down to, things like that, like housing. Like, as opposed to affordable artist housing, why not have low-income artist housing? Like, most of the culture, and I've toured around the world, and the culture that, for instance, people know of the Bay Area are not the ones that's mostly funded, that has, it's not the painters who are in the galleries or anything like that. It's people like Tupac, Sly and the Family Stone, all these folks that come from these neighborhoods where they might have been the only, it's like you're fighting to just carve out the time to work on your art. And where there were maybe other people that might have even been better. There definitely were people that were better than me. And I just, you know, because I also, I mean, the other part of it is that I had a particular I had movements that I wanted to connect my art with, so I felt like the being irresponsible with finances and just doing this, that I had something else, some other reason to do it, so I could justify that. But maybe other folks that haven't been involved in a movement that would become amazing artists, that would be known around the world, they're not being supported in those ways, so yes, I myself am doing better than I was, because I was doing a lot worse than most people would have thought, you know, for a couple decades.
I think people see you, like, and I've had them too, if they see your poster up everywhere, they think you're doing well. When you're like, no, I'm $500 in the hole because my poster's up everywhere. And I had to pay a guy to hang them because the coffee shops wouldn't trust me to hang them, so I had to pay the poster guy to hang them up. He was a great guy. He lives in Oakland. I think, and what you're talking about when you say Tupac and Sly and the Family Stone, and I as a comedian, I can speak to this, it's about, a lot, one of this is about how we define what is art. And I can say, as a stand-up comedian, that's not defined as art. It's not defined as one of the higher art forms, even though it is one of America's original art forms, right up there with jazz and hip hop. And I like that we're doing some of that. I appreciate that. But in the same way as hip hop is not necessarily defined as art, there's not a lot of talk of the people, like of funders who have the money funding the up and coming hip hop artists.
Well, and the reason why is this is, and I can't speak necessarily for comedians, but the connection to the art there's always this connection to art from people of color that happened 20-something years ago. That's different than the connection to art from people of color that's happening now. So for instance, just recently I think they had a Tupac statue at the Oakland Museum, where 20 years ago, almost exactly 20 years ago, the city of Oakland would not let Tupac have a concert here, right? And there are examples of this sort of thing around the country. Now, here's the thing, is that the music from 20-something years ago is always, no matter what year you can be in the 50s and you can put this to that. The music of 20-something years ago of people of color is usually something that's supposed to represent a time when people of color weren't so wild, when people of color had their families together more, when people of color when the art of people of color was supposedly more artistic or more intellectual or more emotion filled. You know, this is what they were saying in the 60s about the blues. This is what they were saying, you know, saying that the blues was in Oakland they had a ban, according to John Handy, they had a ban on the blues in Oakland, saying that it caused, in the 60s, saying that it caused stabbings and people being killed, and so they had a ban on the blues. 20 years after that, it was the music that was brought up, like about hip hop. Why can't hip hop be more like that, right? And the same thing goes for like swing music into rock and roll when it was black. All of those things are about this idea that the culture that the culture of people of color 20 years ago was better, and what that says is that the problems that people are having in their communities have to do with culture, as opposed to the real thing is that they have to do with the system the economic system that we're in, right? So there's this idea that people of color are savage or all these things, and you can point to the culture, and therefore that shows you why people are impoverished. So there's this idea of the culture of poverty that is causing the poverty, and you point to the current music, the current culture as the example of that. But in reality, we know that capitalism must have a certain amount of unemployed people to exist. Like, you can't have full employment under capitalism, because then everyone could demand whatever wages they want. And people like Wall Street Journal, things like that, they openly worry about it when the unemployment rate goes too low, because then wages go up and stocks go down. But it's better to not explain poverty as a built-in part of capitalism, and to instead explain poverty as the fault of the impoverished. And the way to do that, is to blame it on the culture of the impoverished. To show that, and so there's always a disconnect. So all this stuff, like, personally, like, I don't like some of this, Gucci gang, I don't know. But that's just me, it didn't come out when I was in high school, so that's why.
I love the fact that some people don't realize you're literally quoting a song. Gucci gang, Gucci gang, Gucci gang, Gucci gang, Gucci gang, Gucci gang, Gucci gang.
However, 20 years from now, it will be the thing that's way more artistic than whatever people of color are doing then.
If only we could get back to mumble rap. That was when black people really were keeping their families together.
And there's all these things that were, when people were, like, when people used to break dance in the 80s, they would do that instead of fighting, things like that.
When you're a jet all the way.
And so then what ends up happening is that whatever art we're doing right now is the one that you're not supposed to be supporting, right? And we support forms that are still valid. However, they are not the ones that most people are connecting with, and we get this kind of sort of attitude about it. And I think, like, definitely what I do musically is not considered like what's happening exactly right now or whatever. And I never was on top of whatever was happening right then. I never could do that. So, our music stays evergreen. But the thing is that, we got to look at what it is that we are railing against and why we're railing against it, and how to support that art, and how to support those communities that are happening right there. There was, I don't live in the Lower Bottoms now. Lower Bottoms is an area in West Oakland. But at a time when I used to live there, there were other, there was a black cultural organization that came in, and they were very concerned with making sure there were drum circles and certain kinds of events that were happening in that neighborhood, and eschewing, and to a certain extent, and I'm talking about one particular organization, putting a criminal identity on people standing around their car with the music playing loud, which really is a drum circle, and is community, is people standing out there, and then we have these sort of ideas about, there's a lot of people standing on the corner, a lot of black folks standing on the corner, they must be up to no good. Let's figure out how we can change this into this other thing that we identify as real culture or as real art. And I think, there are ways to support some of the stuff that exists while also opening people up to drum circles, to, different kinds of dance and things like that. But anyway, I don't even remember how I got on this right now.
Well, I mean, we're here talking to people who connect people to funders or are funders themselves, and I feel like just to sort of take it back to the idea that it seems like, and Favianna made this point very well, which is why when she walked off stage, it felt like we were all done. It felt like it's over now. She did such an effective job. Why would we need two people to talk about it some more? Shout out to Favi. So the idea that people who fund art want to fund art that has either been classified as intellectual.
And you know what? I don't know the stats on that. It's just my personal limited experience, because maybe everybody coming to this conference, I'm preaching to the choir about that, because they're looking to fund things in a different way.
Even if you're preaching to the choir, they need to be able to, it's better if they quote you saying it than if they just say it themselves. That's how that works, I find. Then they don't sound like it's just their opinion. They go, another person said, and he directed a movie. So continue.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I wouldn't have been able to make that movie were it not for me finding out about the grant from SF Film, which was through the Rainin Society. Like, I would have been doing art, but a lot of times with the other side of trying to survive while doing music, it takes away from the creation part. So we're on constantly on tour. You know, if you're making pennies, you got to collect a lot of them. And so, you know, in order to make this movie happen, I needed to be able to stay put and work on it. And I just so happened to meet somebody who was like, hey, you know about SF Film, Filmmaker in Residence program, then went over there, got into that, and then found out about the grants through that. But it was just, even for me, that people would have thought was more plugged in, it was, you know, almost by accident, you know, that I came into those series of events that led me to that. And so I think, you know, I think a big, to try to, if we want to get more people of color involved in being able to make arts, and we're doing that through grants, there are just some regular standard of living things that could be funded. There could be low income artist housing. There could be daycare for artists, you know, that open up some space for, you know, women who have kids who are artists that are now, you know, are now only able to do certain things because they're by themselves with kids, or whatever, or men that would normally quit doing.
I mean, I was just talking to our friend Nato Green yesterday about this, and we were talking about the idea of doing a New Year's show, and we both have kids, and I was like, I'm not doing a show where I have to be on stage at midnight on New Year's Eve. I'm not doing that because I'm too old and I got too many children for that. And I was like, but we can do an 8 o'clock show, and eventually we're like, how about a 4 o'clock show? The idea being that we have to reconceive how all of this works so that it supports not only the artists, but the audience who the artists are attracting.
Yeah.
You know, and there's like 4 o'clock show with a daycare, and suddenly, but there's nothing in place for that because we haven't expanded the idea of how art should be getting to the world and how art should be created. And until we, and I mean you, expand that idea, we're giving you these ideas for free, basically. So you're only
an artist studio of some sort, music, film, visual arts, comedy. I don't know, what do you do? Yeah, but I mean,
once again, like, even here you're like comedy.
I mean,
see, it's a thing
like,
where
how
people
do you
stand on stage and tell
yeah,
jokes.
Yeah, like how do you got to do that at a nightclub or something?
No, you don't. I have done shows at 10 in the morning. That's the thing. Even that is the idea that comedy happens in dark rooms at night full of people, full of drunks. And the minute you say that, there's certain people who go like, that doesn't sound like fun. Yeah, it's fine. Just go down those dark stairs in the back of that basement. There's a microphone and a spotlight, and you'll be surrounded by drunk people. That's not everybody's idea of a good time. And so I know artists here in the Bay Area, comedians. I will refer to them as artists in this tent because this is the artist tent.
Yeah.
Outside, I'll stop calling them artists. But like that the minute you put those the idea of that's how comedy is done, a lot of people go, I'm not gonna I don't want to do that, and then they think I don't want to do comedy.
Yeah.
Which you're like, no, you don't want to do that. And so I think it's the idea of like we have to, and people who are in the idea of funding the arts have to come up with creative ways to bring in new people who are being frozen out by the traditional means of performance.
Yeah. And so one way to do that besides the housing is some sort of art centers that have the daycare in them, that's what it's paid for, and and people can, and even just knowing that it exists, even if you're somebody that doesn't have kids yet, or isn't planning on having kids, it gives you a different idea of who the community of artists are, and what you can do with your life, right?
Right now there's sort of the current thing in comedy is after Hannah Gadsby's Netflix special, Nanette, she's a queer woman from Tasmania, over in that side of the world, Australia. I don't say Australia, but Tasmania, but Australian. And her special was very much a sort of a discussion about what is comedy and how comedy is in the world, and the harmful ways which traditional mainstream comedy takes up space. And there's all this talk about, is this post-comedy? Are we now on another side? Is this now, are we through comedy? Because this is now what new comedy is? It's like, no. We're just expanding the idea of what comedy can be. And I think, I feel like the problem is that anytime things exist outside of the mainstream definition of the thing, people think it's not the thing anymore. Yeah. As opposed to, no, it's just opening the idea of what the thing can be.
And I think going off of stealing your point about how,
sampling, you're sampling my point.
Yeah, how changing how people can perform and consume this art can also change what people think that their art is for, right? And how people start creating it, what they think they can do with their art, right? Because I come from a background of way back in the day organizing and stuff like that, I've had an idea of how I would like my art to be consumed and what I would like people to do with the ideas, in a perfect world or something like that. Some people we're given a limited idea of what our art can do, of how our art, and part of that is how it's consumed, how it's, and where we make it, how we make it. And so I think through some of these choices we can have art that's more connected to the movements that are happening in the world. We can have people that are involved with creating movements hone their skills and get better at making that art. Create areas that have cohorts in places of artists that are helping each other get better in places where it normally wouldn't. And I think that having an idea of, without some of this art making, people try to do whatever they think the industry wants, right? So you have so many people that could have made something amazing that are, if they're not figuring out what font will help sell cereal, they are just
Comic Sans.
They're just doing whatever they think will get them on. They're doing these things that will, and so they're making they're writing the films, they're making the songs that they can get someone else to put out, or they can, and so if we want to create this other thing, I think, specific funding around people that want to connect their work to the movements that people have questions about, that the world is thinking about, is going to be really, really important. But it's not going to be able to just be identifying the artists as they exist right now. That's part of it. But creating that platform for folks to come out there, because the first thing that's going to happen is the same thing that's going to happen with us. We're like, we want to make something that has to do with the movement, and you end up with, like, for us, it was like a pamphlet on tape. And not as effective as what we created after figuring it out, you know? And so these are things where we have to work and make them more effective, and we need to have the physical spaces and the bills paid for that.
Yes, the bills paid is important. I think the other thing is that the reason why you're here, one of the reasons you're here, and I'm just going to put this on you because I believe it to be true, the reason that I'm here today is because we also both clearly had a natural disrespect of the genre we were sort of in that I am a comedian, but this thing that I'm doing isn't working for me, so let me go try to find a theater in downtown San Francisco and do something there. Or you, the same thing, like I know people identify me as a rapper, but also I'm gonna write a film. So there's whereas some people when they're in their genre just feel like I have to, like you said, I gotta do the thing that works here, even if it doesn't work for me. And I think that some of that is funders creating spaces for you to learn how to disrespect your genre. Because I know one of the big reasons I'm here is because at some point, Favianna and or Jeff Chang saw me somewhere and was like, he could be something if we invited him to Culture Strike and took him to the border and showed him about what life is like down there. And I was like, and because I was like, okay, nobody else is inviting me places. And I go down there and I see that and I go, my mind is all blown. And then later, because I'm naturally disrespecting my genre, I'm in a meeting at CNN going, do you want to host a show that is about travel around the country? Sure, that's not, even though no comedian has done that before. And then I go, eventually, season 3, I was like, Favianna, come on my show so we can talk about the border again. You know what I mean? So it's the idea of like, we have to encourage people to be disrespectful of their genres because that's how you create new things you haven't seen before, you know? But I think, and we had to wrap it up, but I think the thing that's important is like the process you went through to get to where you are right now, there's no pamphlet somebody can get to show them how to do that. There's not a seminar, because you don't have time to teach it, about how to get here in this chair. There's no pamphlet or seminar about how do you go from stand-up comedian, 7 minutes on Sundays at the Punchline to here, because we sort of had to do it and figure it out. And I think that the job of people who are funders is to look at careers like ours and Favianna's and go, how do we show people how to replicate that in some way so we can create 100 Favies or 100 Boots or 100 Kamau, 97 Kamaus. But I still got more time. The last thing I'll ask you is, what do you want these people to take with them? We get one, you got a minute. So you can't take up so what do you need to tell these people to take with them?
The same thing that for me has to drive me as an artist is that if you don't do it, nobody's gonna do it. Like, it's not just something that you can hope will get better and people will start funding this or do that. This is where it happens. This is like the beginning of a bunch of other artists, you know, ability to create things that matter. And it's not just an idea. You got to figure out how to do it and work with folks to find the artists and to make the spaces. So.
Go see art that you would normally see to find those new voices. Thank you, everybody. I've been W. Kamau Bell. This is Boots Riley. Favianna Rodriguez.
Thank you.
Vote November 6th.